Everyone back to Easing the Reader and the closing of The Great Hunt. My name is Chris Mary Holtman. With me, I have, as always, David Green. And today we have our special guest, Innkeeper Hatch. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
On this very fine Mother's Day.
You're here back as our resident Forsaken at the end of the last final installment to come in and tell us what's going on.
Is that going to happen every time? Like the Forsaken shows up at the end of each book?
You have to watch and find out? Oh, wait, read and find out.
Without any kind of major spoilers, like we're going to go into the Dragon Reborn after this one, and it changes quite a bit after the Dragon Reborn in terms of the structure of everything. So
yeah, that's accurate.
As I understood, the Dragon Reborn starts exactly just as this closes, right? So that's what people have been telling me.
Basically.
Yeah, basically. It's kind of a continuation of the same story. Really, it's the same. It's the closing of this kind of arc of these first two books of, what is Rand? How is Rand going to? Is he going to accept what he is, or is he going to reject what he is, or what? And it's so it's the kind of closing of that arc and the start of a whole new one, which then takes you through the whole middle section of the series. Yeah, which is what I would say. But no, it's so we're at the end of this. But before we go into it, we might as well talk about TV news for a little bit, because, as we're saying before, usually when we do this, nothing ever happens. Well, things have happened generally the day after we've done one of these shows. And it's like, well, when we come back to do this 2 weeks later, it's everyone's talked about it to death. But it was almost the case with us because we had the LAN video last week, which was great, and then yesterday we just got a surprise video from Amazon Germany with an extended look at Moiraine, which also then had a first look at a trolloc in the background as well. And it's fair to say that this video has not been received quite as well as the LAN video, because there's more. I think the LAN video was the one where it was like everyone was like, "This is brilliant, we love this." It's the first one that's come out where no one's been like, "This changes, but it's good," because there was obviously the guitar one. There was people talking about the guitar itself. Rand's sword or Tam's sword, people talk about where the placement of the herons were and so on. The LAN one, everyone was like, "This is cool," but then the Moiraine one again, I know the reason people are talking about this one quite a lot is, one, how she's dressed, and two, there's a breakdancing trolloc in the background.
There does seem to be some odd movement in that trolloc, but again, my current theory is that because this is happening around channeling, that somehow wind is knocking that trolloc backward, and so it's kind of creating some effect during which, honestly, whether or not they intended that's something that we don't, as readers, really, at least for me, I never considered the fighting and the channeling together and how that could create some strange interactions, when there's channeling around fighting, if you will. And all of a sudden 2 people are fighting over here, and then wind sweeps them over there, and all of a sudden they're gone. So I hope that they take that into account. This may be an indication of it, but where you definitely see that interaction of what's happening, not just the big things. I just mean, other things happening that happen to touch on someone that's not directly impacted about it, but is tangentially impacted. So yeah. But the breakdancing trolloc was something that people brought up. What's interesting, I would say this is, I think every trailer has had a little bit of this, or a lot, which is just a lot of angst from some fans that there's not a word for word translation into an adaptation. And no matter how much I think Rafe and their team has said this is not a word for word adaptation, no matter how much Brandon has said, hey, this isn't a word for word adaptation, it doesn't matter, because it becomes kind of like, I found in this page 45 where it shows that Moiraine is only 5'1". I can't believe you did this, whatever. Or I found here where it says that she was wearing a blue dress and that doesn't look like a blue dress to me, so you've ruined it. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much. It's so much angst. I have teenagers, and it feels a lot like that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things. It's funny because we were talking yesterday about something else, and we were talking about how the speculating is fun. It's supposed to be fun, but what I thought was interesting is that when you do like the kind of speculations, like what if, like you were saying, like what if some characters, their love interests were different and what have
Yeah.
you, and all that. These kind of things are good to talk about because it gets the fan base ready for changes. So it's like this might not happen. So let's take my Sean Chan example. That's a big one. They're probably not going to get cut out of the second season. But what if they did? Right. We have to talk about it because I was of a mind, like say a year ago, I was of a mind that there's not going to be that many changes. I was like, they'll probably in the first season they'll probably just have less stops along the way. There'll be less villages, but other than that, it'll be pretty much faithful. And now I'm like, this is going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. And like when I've seen like some of the footage, like especially the costumes, like I think everyone liked what they saw of Lan, but like even Moiraine's, where it's more, I want to say it's more Brandon Sanderson, like from his Mistborn series, than traditional fantasy where like Game of Thrones with like flowing robes and all this kind of stuff. How they were depicted in the books, because Moiraine and Lan are on the road all the time, and I always kind of felt a bit weird about it where Moiraine is like. And Celine in the second book are described as being in like these flowing, beautiful robes, and they're riding horses in the wilderness and everything. So this kind of update of it, where it's like a more of a sleeker look, I think it makes sense to me, and it looks different as well. It looks different to Game of Thrones and Shannara and whatever.
I mean, you have to look different. Like they have to kind of create that. They can't be creating a clone. Like this can't be Lord of the Rings. And you can't be Game of Thrones. Like,
I think we were talking about that on the last show. We had a guest on from Reading the Pattern about, I think you're talking about angst, and I think there is a lot of angst amongst fans because they want to love it and they're expecting to love it, but there's a fear of what if I don't love it.
Yeah,
sure.
And you can go one of two ways. Either you can do an Emperor's New Clothes, which I think I'm going to go out on the line and say that, which is the case with the Shannara show, that there's probably a lot of Shannara fans that will say that they love the show, but they don't because of different reasons. And it may be a true, I mean, in some ways it's a true adaptation of the books, but it just looks to, CW, teeny boppery. And I think here, because I mean, if I were to look at it from just a pure fantasy scholar, point of view, Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time books are in the pantheon of the high fantasy. I mean, it's not, those books are in the same category as, say, the Tolkien books, or even Weiss and Hickman and R.A. Salvatore. That's that kind of 80s. From the 50s to the 80s fantasy. It's part of that culture because and that's what people expect. And even if people haven't read it, they're thinking this is classic fantasy, and they expect a classic fantasy look, even if that's not really what it's supposed to be. I mean, we've talked about it, that when they're in certain parts of certain cities and stuff like that, the characters look more like they're in some kind of like 18th century garb. That's kind of like how they're described, which would be completely in opposition to what general fantasy usually looks like if it's not set in a 18th century world, like the Lives of Loch Lomora, where it's very stuff like that. So I think that's I think that's where that criticism comes from, is like, well, I'm expecting a high fantasy look because Robert Jordan is high fantasy. And that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah. Well, there's three interesting points here. One, the angst I'm talking about is not the disagreement with the choices. The angst I'm talking about is when you're told there's going to be differences, and you're stuck on the fact that there's going to be differences, and you can't, this, no one has ever said this is going to be a word for word adaptation. In fact, they've said the very opposite. And so every time something comes out for you to be like, but there's changes, it kind of becomes that like ad nauseum, like, yes, there are changes. Do I need to tell you again there's going to be changes? There's going to be changes. But, and so to point out and be like, but on page 45, it always feels a little bit disingenuous from fans who at least are aware of that. If you're not aware that there were changes, totally get it. This is the first time you're seeing the material and you're like, wait, there's changes. And, you find out there's going to be. So it's not that side where I think the angst I feel like is where I see repetitive fans who knew about this and have known for a year that there's going to be changes, and they're like, wait, there's changes. It just feels disingenuous. It feels a little bit like trolling. It feels like and that's what I mean by angst. But to the second point that you made about the time period, Jordan does talk about that this is like 17th to 18th century kind of world, but with changes. Like his point wasn't that it was the 17th, 18th century. It was, if you need to have some mind map of like, this isn't, and basically he was saying that in the terms of, this isn't medieval times, and don't call my world medieval times. That'll piss me off. And it did upset him quite a number of times. People said that. He's like, this is not medieval, and if you need something, 17th, 18th century, is that good enough? But this is still, again, a world and metaphysics in which he's already built the mechanisms to accept this, which is the turning of the wheel, and it comes and goes, and this isn't our world. Like, get over the fact that you believe this is our world. It's not actually our world. And it could be the 700,000th iteration of a turning. And regardless if in the turning that Robert Jordan wrote, her dress and Moiraine was 5'1" or whatever, and in this turning of the wheel, Moiraine is 5'9", that's already built into the structure of the world itself. And so as readers, you would think that we'd be much more capable of accepting some interpretation or a difference or an iteration on something, and not so stuck on a single turning of the wheel. But
well, I mean, I liked how aggressive you were when you said 17th, 18th century. Is that good enough for you?
Like, well, I mean, and I appreciate that, but I think that also it's very important. I think people that I talk to and people in general don't have that type of knowledge of the world. They read fantasy books the way they read any other book, and they don't delve into it deeper. They just like, it's a fantasy book, and this is the world I create in my mind because this is how I've been taught that 80s fantasy basically is.
Totally accurate. That's accurate.
And I think those are the people that also get upset when they see the changes, because they've heard or they've seen on Bleeding Cool or read somewhere else that there's going to be a show, but then they don't dig into it. They don't follow anything on Instagram. They're just like, oh, a show is coming, that'll be cool. And then they start seeing these things. And even Bleeding Cool don't comment on that there are changes. They're just saying, here's a video.
Here's the video. I mean that's good in a way, though. I mean, that's good in a way because, like, I think from what we've seen of it so far, especially the LAN video and this new one as well, and I suppose Tom's guitar video as well to an extent, and then the work that you did, Matt, with the unblurring of the lines, you can see already that there's a distinct feel to this. I mean, like, take LAN for example. In fantasy, you have that warrior character you're always having, but usually he is a white guy with long hair and a beard, and he's wearing chainmail and all this kind of stuff. And you've got this first video of Daniel Henney as LAN, and it's like, it evokes that samurai, feudal kind of thing, which is in the series anyway. But straight away, it kind of, he's got a katana and not a big, massive, big broadsword and all this kind of stuff. You look at Tom's guitar, and it's kind of more that gritty kind of feel, like The Witcher. The way that Moiraine is dressed, and also, I mean, the trolloc. I mean, we've not really talked about how it looked like. We only get a brief look at it, but when you think of, again, fantasy, and you think of orcs, goblins, and that sort of stuff. I know trolloc is the Wheel Times version of that, but it looked. I mean, that brief little shot where you see LAN in front of it, it's huge and it's muscular and it looks intimidating. What did you think of? I mean, that little brief look of the Trolloc. What did you think? Did you like how it looked? Was it what in your head? Was it what you thought you were expecting?
Well, we talked about this last during the live stream was, that there's obviously gonna be CGI effects, but it looked like those were practical effects, and there's gonna be a mix of the two. And I think most everyone was hoping for more practical effects with the Trollocs. So, the idea that this looks like a practical effect, I think generally everyone was like, great. We need to get a close up look. One of the viewers that was on talked about kind of some industry experience and mentioned, you're obviously going to have, like, when you get a close up, it's going to be a totally different, it's going to be much more detail. They're actually going to take a lot of care in showing you the detail. And then when you have the further back shot like this one, less detail necessary, less care needed. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what Trollocs look like. And let's be honest, one would imagine that Trollocs are going to have a little bit of different feel. Like, they're not all going to be exactly the same. That would be surprising. That would be a surprising change. But again, who knows what decisions they've made? But that would be a surprising change. But to the point that was just made, yes, absolutely. A lot of fans don't know any of the metaphysics of this, right? And so the struggle is real in the sense of, if you've only read the books once or twice, you've never dug into kind of like the actual metaphysics of the world, and you've just always loved the series and you moved on to other series, and now you found out it was being made into a TV show, that it's not that it's not understood that, there's changes and it's upsetting, but it's the constant droning on about it that's the part that always gets me.
It was the same with Game of Thrones. I mean, there are people who loved Game of Thrones and reread it. I think probably less than did the Wheel of Time, but I think that those who really dug into it and read interviews with Martin and stuff like that really didn't care for Game of Thrones at all. Well, at least the latter half of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I think what this little kind of, I suppose it's like an official leak, I think, what we can call it, because obviously they've jumped the gun, because on the translation of the trailer, it said coming soon. So I think this is the ramp up for the promotional cycle. I think there's definitely, I know John from What Up's been talking a little bit about his sources thinking that there's going to be a trailer in the end of May, maybe the start of June. And I think this speaks to the fact that there definitely will be, because this feels like it's a slow drip, and it's building up a little bit. The last thing about the trailer that I wanted to kind of talk about, and before we move on to the book, and I did watch the stream last night as much as I could do before I had to. So I don't know if you actually talked about this or not, but the line that Moiraine says in it, where she says, "Do not underestimate the women in this tower."
Yeah.
So that, to me, and I know this has been a big, and again, it talks about changes again, and I think this is a good change. I think this definitely says that they're going to be in Tar Valon during the show, because this tower would, to me, says that she's actually there in the tower when she's talking about that.
Yeah, so that was, I think that is something that would come up the first time, the clip of Moiraine that was released originally, that was like more like the 1.5 second one.
The OG.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Rafe said about that, I want to say Rafe did some Q&A afterwards and said that I thought he said that line was like recorded for the trailer.
Right.
Or something. He said something like, though not in that exact way. I don't know. In other words, the statement might exist in the series, but maybe not exactly like she made the statement. I thought that's what he said. I thought he added some kind of texture to the understanding of that. But I would be shocked. And I said this from our first time we did those live adaptation shows back when we started the Dusty Wheel, which I would be absolutely shocked if they didn't take an opportunity to take us to the White Tower. Like, why wouldn't we see what was going on in the rest of the world, And so I hope, for goodness sakes, I hope that we get to the White Tower in some form or fashion, whether or not it's going to Tar Valon or if it's just the tower itself in Swan Sanche's study or something.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we better get some Aes Sedai, and from all the leaks and things that suggest, some of the audition tapes on Vimeo that were found, it does suggest like we're going to get Aes Sedai, and hopefully we get the tower too.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, one of my favorite dynamics in the whole series is the Moiraine and Swan dynamic, and it's something that we don't. It's something that I'd like to say. I almost did a massive spoiler then, but I stopped myself. It's something that I'd like to see more of in the show. So if there's a way that they can do that, I'd be happy to see it.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about that. I need to be reminded a couple of times. No spoilers.
I almost dropped a massive one then as well. Like it's your influence. When I see you, I'm just thinking no spoilers. It's fine.
That's the problem. I'm not helpful in that regard. But yeah, overall, this extended version or the full version, whatever you want to call this, I really like it a lot. I don't want to be overly critical until I actually get into the the show itself, and so I've kind of stayed away from that. Maybe that bothers some people, but I don't see any value in being overly critical of 4 seconds of visual before we actually get like the show.
Yeah,
when we can zoom in, see the costuming, see the approach they've taken, see the world that they've built, and why they've made certain choices, it'll be a lot easier to kind of have a conversation that's a little bit more cogent than like it's not blue or some other strange obsession.
So. I'm with you. I'm very, very excited about it. I loved the clip. It was great to see a longer bit of it. Love to see. I was hoping that it was going to be the trollocs were going to be practical, and I think they are. I think what I think it was Nablus was talking about with the hero suits, where they have like the ones that are extra detailed, which I'm sure we'll see when they'll probably do like a Variety or Deadline or EW kind of reveal with shots and stuff, which they usually do. But I could with the land video, when you saw the expressions that he was doing when he was fighting, I in my heart I was like, he's definitely fighting against something there, because it just seemed much more natural than, I mean, you see it sometimes where you have especially in behind the scenes stuff where you just see an actor just fighting against thin air, and you can just there was a difference in it. He looked like he was up against somebody. So yeah, very, very excited about it. So we might as well talk about the end of the Great Hunt while we're here.
Let's do it.
Let's go and do it. Oh, Chris has decided to glitch out before.
Yeah, Chris is glitching.
Yeah, I'm glitching. I don't know why I'm glitching.
Because you're so excited about the end of the Great Hunt, you're just like, I can't contain myself.
No, what I was going to say is that the hunt is basically over. Not really. It's not quite over yet. I'm sure it's going to continue.
The hunt is never over.
No, exactly. This was, I mean, it was an interesting, I mean, if you look at it as opposed to the end of the Eye of the World, it was definitely more action here. There's a lot more things that happen. There's a little bit of a, I don't know, love affair blooming, maybe, at least from one character's point.
Okay.
And
who's that? That's too generic. So tell me, did you love the the ending, the first one versus the second one? Where are you at here? Did you think there was progress made?
Oh yes, definitely. I thought that there was progress. I mean, the one thing that I did find, I mean, because I decided I wanted to listen to the audiobook at the end instead of reading it, and then I read it afterwards. And what I kind of was, and then you look at how many chapters are left, and it's just like, oh, there's quite a few chapters left going on here. But actually, the 2 chapters are just like an interview and then something else at the end. So there was 2 chapters less than I expected it to be. So actually everything got what I kind of a lot of the fantasy that I've read has a lot of like action in it. There's like battle scenes are detailed and stuff like that. When you look at like David Gemmell, I think there's a lot of similarities between Gemmell and Jordan in a lot of ways. But I think that those fight scenes are more detailed and stuff like that. And that I kind of like, when we came to the climax of the whole thing, I found that it was kind of like, I still wanted a little bit more. Maybe because I kind of spoiled it for myself and I thought it was going to be longer. And I thought that, well, but it's like Jordan, at least, and I don't know if this changes later, but there's often like Jordan would say like, "There's a battle." There was a battle, and then it feels like, well, there wasn't so much detail about the battle. What happened? And it's like, well, this guy's dead. Oh, okay, he died, and then this guy's dead. Oh, okay, he died too. When did that happen? And it's like this thing that happens at on the other side that you never get to see. And I mean, obviously, that's because a lot of in this particular part, there's a lot of focus on Rand and his battle against the Dark One. And what I do love is that Jordan very smartly manages to make the fight scene between Rand and the Dark One to be interesting and more alive, because he talks about the stances, the different fighting styles he's doing, instead of going, and then he swung at his head and he ducked, which can be, you know, as somebody who tries to write fight scenes and get like completely, you know, I bore myself sometimes because I just keep repeating the exact same thing. But on the other hand, that is exactly what happens in a battle. I talked to Lee Conley, who David and I know is a British fantasy author, about that, and he's just like, well, yeah, really, a real sword fight is maybe a couple of seconds long, because you don't have the energy to fight forever holding a big sword and wearing armor. So either you can go one of two ways. I
want to say they do a good job of that in like Vikings. Like they, they'll be in the midst of, and it's like 2 or 3 swipes and somebody's injured.
And Lee Conley is a swords master or something like that. He does fight with swords. Okay. He knows the style. Yeah, so he knows.
Yeah, it's a good way that Robert Jordan does that. I think with the fight forms, instead of just describing like he did an overhand swing and he did it. The like cat crosses the courtyard. It's like but it automatically puts you into mind. You know what it has, that kind of like slouch, and you just picture someone walking like a cat and that kind of laid back style. And no, it's a really it's quite a unique approach to writing action that he has. There are more battles to come, and he does handle them in a different way. Can you just let me share the screen there, Chris? I just want to show this little meme to everyone. So whenever I think of, I love The Great Hunt. It's one of my favorite books of the whole series. Right?
So I have to allow you to. You have to become the host, right?
I had me as a host. Yeah, I want to share this so I can show you, because this always makes me laugh. And so I love this book. I love the ending as well. I think I know Matt, you have some issues with the horn, which I'm sure you'll get to in a second. But what I always think about the ending of this book, and it's something that I'm really intrigued to see what they'll do in the series, is this meme. Just sums it up, especially at the bottom with the 2 guys above the mountains, just singing away. It's just like.
Yes, this is a good one. I love Loyal there.
Yeah, it's good. And that little wolf cub there as well, Matt with the horn, the two guys singing. I'm just so intrigued as to what is going to happen in the TV show at this point, because I always try and put it in my head, because it is such an epic ending. Like, you've got the personal stuff going on with Ingtar. You've got the escape with the girls as well, Egwene, Elaine, Nynaeve. You've got the whole big battle. You've got the horn. You've got all the heroes coming back, and then you have like Rand and Beelzemon just fighting in the sky against each other as well above it. It's good. It literally goes from the smallest aspect that you can in a battle to like this huge metaphysical, mind-blowing thing.
Yeah, it's good, because I mean, if we just like quickly talk about what actually happens, is that Egwene is saved. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if we just take it quickly, she's saved. Rand, Mat, Perrin, Ingtar, and Land, right? If I remember, are sent away to go. No,
not Land.
Not Land. No.
Is it Huron then? So who is it that goes with them? Yeah, Huron.
Yeah, Huron's with them.
Yeah. So they get sent to go fight, whereas some other people, like Loyal, for instance, just sits and reads his book.
Yeah.
Uh,
He waits.
yeah, and that I found that to be really odd. But then I kind of realized once I got in, I was coming to like the battle and stuff like that, is that Robert Jordan must have just realized that he had too many people, and he can't send a bunch of people, because then we have, I mean, they blow the horn, and Arthur Harquin comes back, and there's like this mass of bodies, and then so he has to kind of like, what happens to the different people, and then I'm gonna have Loyal in there running around too, and then it's like it doesn't make any sense. So I need to have like bare bones here.
Yeah,
and I kind of now I feel like we missed out there. Jordan does a good job of this idea of taking the metaphysics and the prophecies and giving people kind of rationale for decisions that otherwise would feel maybe a little bit more forced. And Varen say, well, no, we're basically gonna stay over here because 5 ride forth or something like that. I don't know. And all of a sudden it gives it, but you don't, it doesn't feel in that moment like, well, that's dumb, because you're like, yeah, why would Loyal go there anyway? Like, he's not going to be helpful. And so it's almost like she's rationalizing it for Loyal. Like, we're going to stay back here and we're going to do some important things too, but we're not going to get mixed up in that, which it works, I think.
Yeah, I think with this book overall, you can see that it was much more, maybe plotted is the wrong word, but he had much more of it set down in stone, I think, when he went to write it from the start. Because I think with Eye of the World, it gets a little bit, the structure and the pacing gets a little bit loosey-goosey a little bit and towards the middle, and especially towards the end, because they get to Candlin and it's just like, we need to go to the Eye of the World, and it's just like a breakneck race to the end of the book in 10 chapters or so then. Whereas this one, there's a steady build-up of characters being moved into places, stakes being risen, being brought up for characters. I mean, even like the Rand and Turok fight as well. It's like it's almost like that would be a test for a protagonist to overcome at the end of a normal book, but obviously it's just a prelude of what is to come.
Yeah, and I loved the Turok, that part really. I thought that was, and I was a little sad. Because I mean, I did like Turok, as I said before. He kind of reminds me of Hedonism Bot, who is my most favorite Futurama character. And I mean, to me, he just like embodies that kind of hedonistic character that you'd find in opium dens in Victorian age.
Yeah, it was sad that he just came onto the scene and he was gone. The series I think could have used a little bit more of Turok in it. I want to point out something kind of a little bit off the trail of what we were discussing, but related, which was in bringing up the point that David, you were making of how Jordan was putting this all together. One of the things we talked about recently in our Robert Jordan's Notes episode, maybe it was a couple months ago, was about Galad, and that Galad, Jordan had an with bringing Galad along to this, and that this would be kind of formative for him of seeing what was happening with Aes Sedai and how much they couldn't be trusted. And, he would have this experience with Leandrin and going in and the Shanchan and seeing this destruction and seeing what the Aes Sedai, and again, coming away from that. And what's interesting is he keeps the lack of trust, and he keeps the after effect if Galad had gone, but he doesn't have him go, which is also a kind of another technique that he uses, which is he doesn't drop the idea completely. He often gives the character what the effect would have been of those experiences, but then he changes with those experiences in a way, or doesn't give them those experiences. And you just kind of go along with it because it's generally believable. When you find out, like, oh, he intended them to go, well, that would make, his exposure to the white cloaks there, and seeing the machinations of the Aes Sedai and just how he wants to get away from this all made a lot more sense to me in that concept than it ever had.
I mean, that could have been one of those things where it was when he was looking at it, he was just thinking, and as Chris just said then, just how many characters he would have to juggle. As a writer, it is quite a lot, and it is something I think he does. I think I prefer, in the whole, the ending of this this book to The Dragon Reborn, but I think he handles the multiple characters better in The Dragon Reborn.
Yeah.
Why they're all kind of there, like it's funny because you can see that he was obviously a very experienced writer at this point, but you can still see that he's still figuring things out in the first few books.
Oh yeah, he changes all sorts of stuff. That's the fun part about it. So
yeah,
I love the ending of this book. Although, like you brought up, David, I've had differences, and so I'm kind of curious, Chris, about this. Do you like the blowing of the horn aspect of this? The end of this book.
Like, well, that's a difficult question, Matt.
Okay, let me hear it. I mean, that sounds like controversy here.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's controversial, but it's. I like the concept of it. I like not maybe the concept of it. I like the action of it. So I like how it brings. I mean, the scene is cool. That's what you know what I mean. If I just put my teenager, I'm reading this as a 18 or 19-year-old hat on. I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. All these ancient heroes coming back, and it's like this big thing. But I think it's too much too soon in the series. I think the way that it kind of ties the horn to Matt is problematic, and I think it's too much like almost like Deus Ex Machina area as well, and also it's a bit too much like Return of the King. So I can see that there's issues with it. So I can see why you're not a big fan of it, and I can see why other people are not a big fan of it. I think as a thing there, I think it is an easy crutch to lean on, and I think maybe if he kind of went back to it again, maybe he would have done it differently. But it is still a cool scene, and I would love to see it. But yeah, I just think I think it's one of those things that, and again, not to go into any kind of big spoilers for the rest of the series, but it's one of those things where it's an idea that he's had and he's executed the idea, and then he's kind of left himself into a bit of a hole where he's like, what do I do with this?
Sure.
Well, I think if you look at the book, if you look at the book, says Eye of the World and then The Great Hunt, and then you're kind of like, I don't know what's coming next. If you're thinking that this is kind of like the end of this chapter, and you're not really, The Dragon Reborn hasn't come out yet.
Right.
If you look at it at that aspect, like as an entity, then it is cool. Yes, I like it. But for those of you who've read the whole series and can see the bigger picture, then maybe it's problematic. But for me, I thought it was really cool. I have to agree with Dave. It's a cool scene, and even if I'm not 18 or 19 years old, then I think it's cool. I think it's cool. No, I think it. Obviously, it's a horn. Somebody's got to blow it. You can't. It's like the old Tolstoy trick. If you put a horn on the table in the first act, you got to blow that horn in the last one.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Which is, I think it is a cool scene. I got in trouble with some fans when I suggested in our live adaptation that they cut that particular scene, or that they do something a little bit differently, because it did feel like too much too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And they could do a variation of things there that don't necessarily involve that. But if it came down to, between the Eye of the World ending and this ending, and I had to pick one, this is definitely, I love this ending so much more.
You'd pick the Green Man to blow the horn.
No, I it's not that I don't enjoy this aspect. It was more, like you said, as you're going through, and maybe that's the thing that I should take into consideration here, which is a viewer for the first time won't feel this way, right? As if they haven't read the books and they get to this cool ending, what seems to be definitely not what is it called? Definitely not in the season 1. It doesn't feel like, from what all the news has been released. So let's say this was their season 2 ending. If you've never read the books, this would be a cool ending. And you have no reason to, like you said, Chris, just because we've read the entire series, we know all the things that happen. Maybe that affects our perception of this. So in that light, where a new viewer comes in and experiences it, I totally believe that it really, really works really, really well, if that makes sense. And so maybe that is, really, maybe that would be smart for them, is to just take the pacing as Jordan did it here, which is, take someone through their first adventure, and it really does satisfy in that moment. So maybe I can change my mind and look at it from a live adaptation standpoint of the first viewer viewpoint, and maybe I'll change my mind now on this one.
I think
Would you be happier if someone else blew the horn? Because I always thought, maybe maybe not always. The first time I was happy enough that it was Matt, but I think maybe the second or third time when I started reading through it, I always thought that Ingtar should have blew the horn.
Me too. Of course,
Interesting.
I'm a big Ingtar fan. You
love Ingtar anyway, but I just think because of the way that the horn works, where the person is tied to it, and Ingtar's arc is one of redemption, and I don't think from the way that Robert Jordan uses Matt in the second book, I don't think the redemption kind of thing or the heroic moment is earned all that much. I think with Ingtar, with his arc that he has, that it would be more of a poignant moment for him to have that, because he's so driven to get the horn and to use it to defeat the Blight, because he doesn't want to be a Dark Friend anymore, and he wants it to go and lead the charge into the Blight. But then if he just gave that up to save his friends, and it would be a much more of a moment for him. I mean, he has a great moment anyway. His ending is really, really good, and it's a reason why so many people like that character, because people kind of laugh at him as well because he just likes fighting things and he just wants to kill things and everything. But the ending with the reveal of him being a Dark Friend and the remorse that he has and that he wants to change and everything, I think people just like him because of that. And I think him being the one to blow the horn would really work well into that. And as well, it'd be a good way of getting rid of that, well, this person is tied to this object now, and what do I do with it? The rest of the thing. How do you think about that? Would you want in the show, if it was going to be blown, would you want it to be Matt, or would you want it to be changed to someone else?
So I can see that. I hadn't ever really gone down the road of having Ingtar blow the horn. At least I remember. I mean, I've probably gone down there like a decade or two ago. So I think what my thought here would be that Jordan would say something to the effect of, well, Ingtar would never have blown the horn, because regardless of his attachment to, the dark side, his sense of honor in this way would be that it would never allow him to.
Okay.
And so I guess that's where I would kind of lean into that decision, would be if they had Ingtar, it would seem a bit out of character from what Ingtar is about when it comes to getting the horn. Like, his goal is to bring it back, not be the person that blows it. And so for him to choose that in that last moment seems a bit out of character, whereas for Matt to do it seems well within character.
Right,
okay. And so that's kind of how I would take it. I can see the journey aspect of how it would be a really impactful moment to have Ingtar do it. I just don't think he would, and I know Matt would. So I do like how Jordan took that road.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but so are you still on the fence of have it in or have it not? Or
so no, this conversation, what's funny is I had a podcast episode, and I also was comparing how some books ended and said, well, I like this one over other books. So, and people were like, okay, cool. Matt's let Barney blow at this point, because I had kind of pushed back a lot on this idea. But I think taking it from perspective of first viewer journey into the books, I do like it there. And I know people are going to, they'll be like, he said it again. He was lying. No, I really hadn't looked at it from a first viewer journey. It's really hard to do. But when I think about that, what Chris said, Chris has inspired me to say, to let Barney blow. If you
well, I mean, change his mind. You're going to be heralded exactly on the dusty wheel of savior.
I think the important part is, and I think that's where, I mean, obviously I trip up a lot of times because of my background, is that, like, I mean, I'll often get in trouble because of criticizing Harry Potter, for instance, without thinking of, like, there are millions of people that hadn't read any fantasy before they read Harry Potter, and for them that's the first thing that they ever read, so they automatically think that it's great. And sometimes, I mean, I lose myself in that, and I lose myself in a lot of that scholarly discourse. And it's good to, and then it's the same with the whole thing of it being set in medieval times, because even if you don't know any better, that's what you assume. Just like when I read the Earthsea trilogy, and then the TV show came, and they were all like black, and I was just like, but what? Wait, what? Why are they black? And then I had to go back and read them, and they're supposed to be dark skinned, but since I've been reading a lot of fantasy, I didn't read it that deep. I just read it as fantasy characters, and unfortunately, they're all white. I mean, was my experience up until that point. So that's how I read them.
Yeah,
maybe with a tan. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Matt, you and Daniel Green went into that on a really great video you did that was on the Dusty Wheel on Daniel Green's channel, where it is almost like subtle programming for people that read fantasy, because every single cover that you ever saw, everyone was white on the cover. So it doesn't matter how. I mean, I think one of a big instance of it in Wheel of Time is how Sen Bui is described. And I always took him as being dark skinned, the way he was described. But
did you? Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it's described it's as gnarled as an old root or something like that, isn't he? And I was like, that's not a white person. But the funny thing is that he's been cast as a white person in the show.
Yes, yeah. We did. I did laugh about that afterwards after doing the video. There is this has been my experience interacting with fans that are disgruntled about it. Not other fans who have kind of looked into some things and said, okay, yeah, this works for me. The disgruntled fans, when Egwene's skin is analogously associated with a white flower, they're like, see, white. Then when Sen Bui is analogously associated with a dark root, they say, see, white tan. That's programming. That is a bias of seeing white as, well, that is related to race, and then seeing dark as an old root, well, that is related to the same previous race, just a little bit tan. And that tends to be that tends to come out, and it makes sense, right? Like, I was there too, right? Like everyone looked like me. I read these books when I was 15. I think when the books came out was it 90? Anyways, I think I started in 90, and everyone looked like me. Even characters that I went back later and was like, oh no, that was pretty obvious. Jordan was very obvious here. Everyone was what I associated, like you said, Chris, with the fantasy that I was seeing at the time. So it's not that it doesn't make sense, it does. But I like that Robert Jordan gave some hints, and actually with the Midlands themselves is a very, very it's much more of a darker complexion place than it is a lighter complexion and a fair complexion place.
That's in the book though as well. That's explicitly stated.
No, it's in the book.
In one of the most famous scenes in the Eye of the World, which probably isn't going to be in the TV show, but hopefully it'll be in the second season, is when Rand meets Aleida and she pulls his sleeve back and says, people from the Two Rivers don't have as coloured skin as you.
Yeah, well, and he actually goes to am I spoiling it? No, he goes to Camelin in the first book, and he says like that there he saw people with darker, like really dark skin and really light skin, and he was saying that he wasn't used to seeing people with like really light skin or really dark skin. So Jordan was giving us an idea if we're Rand and seeing and that was in Camelin, which I always thought was funny because people get like really upset. I'm like, but that's in Andor. Rand went to Camelin and he experienced this. He's still in Camelin. So, but that he did give us. But again, Jordan never focused on it, right? It wasn't. He explicitly did not call out race in his books explicitly.
Because, I mean, and that's interesting too, because I mean, obviously, in their world, you probably wouldn't, because it's probably. I mean, we obviously put our goggles on it because
Yeah.
race is a big deal here. So and obviously in a lot of fantasy they don't. I mean, they don't discuss race as an issue, more class maybe than anything else.
Yeah,
But
culture in Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
It's culture is the focus, and that's the way. And it's quite of an elegant sidestep that he does with that, because you can get bogged down with that. And I know that's one of the big criticisms of Lord of the Rings, is that all the villainous people are brown, like, and that was one of the things going way back. And with Wheel of Time, he focuses on culture instead. So you have these cultural rivalries where you have people that from certain cities that don't like people from other cities, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And it sidesteps the whole, well, what do they look like? But that doesn't matter. It's what they do, and it's what they believe in, and it's how they carry themselves. And it's and that's what makes the world so deep as well, because it is this big melting pot. And when you talk about places like Andor and Gildan, these places that are in the Midlands, it is like a melting pot of all these different people. Yep. and different. But it's funny, my best mate who started reading them shortly after I did, for years, until like maybe a year or so ago, thought that Loyal was blue. He thought all the Orgies were blue. I don't know why.
He's a Smurf. Just a big Smurf.
Loyal being blue. I like it.
Maybe he will be. Just because of that, maybe he will be in the show.
I know, yeah. And I was like, where'd you get that from? He was like, I have no idea. I just
always thought they were blue.
We'll know if your friend works in the show.
Yeah. It's not told me he has, but we'll see. We'll see shortly.
Yeah. What was your, Chris? Well, kind of curious. What was your takeaway at the end of the Great Hunt? Was it compelling at this point?
Yes, it was. I mean, I would say if I were to go back and look at my notes from when I was at uni and I had to read these books, definitely I would, because I think Eye of the World did not make me want to continue reading the series. It did not. There was like nothing there that said like this is going to be like an interesting and exciting thing to read. Great Hunt, if I look back, it probably did, but then obviously I felt kind of tired, Jordaned out with two so thick books in a row, and then being forced to read them obviously puts a stigma on anything that you do.
Yeah,
unfortunately. But I think this is, and reading it again now, definitely I see that this is, there's a greater value in these books. And definitely I would say that Great Hunt is probably, or should be, in the pantheon of greater fantasy books. I'm not saying that the whole series, we'll see, but at least the Great Hunt should definitely be there. It'll be interesting to see what the Dragon Reborn has. But I think, everything that they do, up till the end, the one thing that I find a little queer is that they see them fighting in the sky, and I'm hoping that they don't have that in the show, because I think that would look, as the kids say, cringe.
That'd be a cringe. It's going to be an interesting question of if they include it, and then how they include it. And I'm sure that that's a tough thing to do well. It's easy for us to kind of throw into our minds and imagine, and somehow things are less cringy to us in our heads than they are when you actually visualize them. Just like when people talk about, well, they should adapt exactly what Rand said, but in the show, and somehow the way reading it sounds great in our heads, but then you read it out loud and you're like, that's not going to work. Like, don't say it that way.
It's like people do not speak like that.
No, right. I'm wondering if that's what George Lucas thought when he saw Star Wars, after like he'd written the dialogue out. It's just like, this is some great dialogue.
That's what Harrison Ford said, wasn't it? So he said, you can take this shit, but you can't say it.
Yeah. Well, I think Carrie Fisher was talking about that. It's like she had to do so many retakes because it's like, I can't talk like this. This isn't normal. No, people don't speak like this in this way.
Yeah.
But anyway, we kind of have to wrap it up here.
But, so we're going into uncharted territory with the third one. So where because obviously for people maybe coming in the first time, Chris read these two a long time ago, but when you were in university and you had to read them, and you kind of forgot pretty much everything that happened in the Great Hunt.
The Great Hunt is was a big, big hole. Definitely, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was always fascinated by the cover. I really like the cover compared to Eye of the World.
It's one of the better ones, yeah. It's one of the better ones.
And I mean, the horn is front and center.
Well, there's some. That's why I said to you about the Dusty Wheel, the covers, man. That'd be some great discussion.
I don't get lost on that one because
on the American cover, is it supposed to be Loyal that is holding the horn?
Yeah. I think so. It might be a trolloc though as well.
No, now I have to remind myself, just because I always forget.
I think it's meant to be.
That's not Loyal.
Is it not?
No, it's who's holding the horn.
Oh, he's holding the horn. No, it's Rand, isn't it?
It's Rand, yeah.
Yeah. But I always thought that the figure had pointy ears.
No, Loyal's there with him. It's Rand, Loyal, and Celine, I think.
Okay.
Because that's the cover that I used to prove to my mate that Loyal wasn't blue. I was like, well, look, he's on this cover.
Really? So how did you explain the cover of Eye of the World?
The first one is, it can't be explained.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yes.
Or the one that we were talking about, the ebook cover for the Eye of the World, where Rand is looking like a swarthy pirate.
Yeah.
With his shirt open and his hair flying in the breeze.
Yeah, Mills and Boone style. I do like that one.
I do like the Great Hunt versus the Eye of the World. But actually the Eye of the World cover I love because it's the first cover I saw in the library, and that's what the librarian who was a friend of this 15-year-old geek, book geek, pointed out and was like, excitedly pointed out this book by this new author, and I was like, it's blue and it looks really cool. It looks very fantasy,
Yeah, that it does. And I mean, as I said, if you compare Eye of the World to any of the fantasy covers of the era, be it Weiss and Hickman, be it Salvatore, be it Eddings and stuff like that, it fits right into that.
Yeah,
I would definitely say that it was targeted to that audience.
I think with the Eye of the World cover, I think it's there's no doubt about it that it's iconic and it's striking. It looks good, but when you look into the details of it as someone that's read the book, you kind of wait, what?
Sure. Yeah, the armor will always be an issue.
Yeah. But it looks. I mean, it does look. I mean, if you show most people that, it takes people's attention. It's a striking cover. But yeah, it's just, man. I could talk about that. I could talk about Eye of the World cover, Wheel of Time covers.
Yeah.
We should do
Chris,
an episode.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Chris, how far did you end up reading back in the day? I can't remember.
No, it was the Great Hunt. Was the
Great Hunt? Okay.
Because then I think I had to read. I jumped into some other. I don't know if Eddings was after that or if Eddings was before. Eddings I knew beforehand. But yeah, no, it was under a period when I was writing my thesis on fantasy literature, and we had these required readings. So
this is green field for you then. Yeah, this is all new.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be all new.
What are your hopes for this book then? I'm kind of curious.
Well, I mean, I was hoping that Rand is gonna own up to being the dragon, because I feel like he's waffling still quite a bit.
Okay.
And I'm a little tired of his crap. And David has said that Matt will stop being so whiny in the next book. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's my exact words. Matt is my favorite Wheel of Time character. I love him, but I despise him in the Great Hunt. And even this time when I was reading through it, I was like, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt this time. I'm gonna try and read him in a fresh, and I was just like, I just what is he doing with this character in this book?
But I thought you meant that he was going to do something horrible, because I kept waiting for that, and I just I don't remember Matt, because I was expecting there to be a turn, but he was going to turn, he was going to murder somebody, something like that, and I don't remember that from the Great Hunt. That it was.
It's just very just. It's just too.
But you made it sound like he was going to do something horrible, and
no. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do that. I mean, he obviously thought about it because when in the flicker scene.
Oh yeah.
He's other things that he could do. He's done something very bad in that one, and I always thought at that point he might start softening up his stance a little bit to Rand, and he kind of does a little bit. But that is the point with this one. The only criticism that I have of the Great Hunt is that he doesn't seem to know what to do with Matt and Perrin at all throughout the whole book. They don't really have a lot of things to do. They have more to do in the next one. Well, Perrin does kind of, I suppose, but Matt definitely does. But with that, they have the conflict at the start, which is fine, and the conflict is over a misunderstanding, which that happens. That's one of those things. Perrin quickly moves on from it. And Matt, it's more just how his character is, and that's just how Matt is. But it's just like he just won't let go of this perceived slight that he's had, even though he knows the reasons why, and he knows what Rand is and who Rand is, and he sees that Rand is trying to do like. If Matt was in Rand's position, Matt would have ran away a long, long time ago. He would have just been like, sod the dagger, sod the horn, I'm out of here. But Rand is like, has had every opportunity to get out of there, but he's like, no, I need to get this dagger. I don't care about the horn, I need this dagger for my friend, right? And then Matt just won't let go. He just won't let go of this thing. And that's like, I suppose it's brilliant writing in a way, because it's just like, you just make, because me as a reader, I'm just like, just get over it, man. Just look what your friend is doing. Like, he's doing this for you. Just stop being so bullheaded about it, and just get on with it. So yeah,
it is interesting that the entire book is, when you think about it, it's just like it's a chase, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a hunt, yeah. But it is, but it's one of the most compelling books for me. I love it from just overall in a fantasy genre. Like the Great Hunt is just a great book.
Exactly.
Inevitably it's about a chest, and they're trying to get it, this chest back that happens to also have a dagger. It's like a chest and a dagger, and that's the entire driving force of a very, very popular fantasy book, which I love.
Because the horn is kind of just a byproduct of what's there. Like the main thing is the dagger and the chest. That's what anyone's interested in. It's what Thane's interested in. It's what Rand is interested in. It's what Matt's interested in. And everything else that kind of happens is not incidental, but it's just like, well, this is happening too. But all the main characters are like, we want this dagger. And it doesn't mean anything to anyone else. Like, and everyone else would be like, we want this hunt. There's like whole societies of people in Ilion and all these other places that they want the horn. They're so desperate for it. And it's like, our main character has had his hands on it plenty of times in the book, and he's just like, I don't care about it. I just want this dagger. It's so funny when you think about it, and it's a brilliant book, and I'm glad that Chris, you enjoyed it as much as we do.
I think the final word, I think, must be that I think it is, like Matt said, it is a great fantasy book if you just look at it as a pure fantasy book, and it does, in a way, could stand alone. It could stand alone if you chose not to read anything else. You could read The Great Hunt, and not lose too much of the plot, I think. But it also, I mean, for a fantasy reader, there are a lot of tropes that are familiar. There's a lot of things, but they're not tired. They're not used in a tired way. And I think, like, say if you read like all of, and I know I've used their names quite a bit today, Weiss and Hickman, if you read all of their Dragon series books, you will get tired of it, because they use the tropes a little bit too much, and it's not so reinventive every time.
Yeah, well, that's why I like some of their other series even more than Dragonlance. Like Deathgate Cycle will always be one of my favorites, just because not that there aren't tropes in there. It's just the way they told that story was so unique, and the story itself, the world itself, was so unique. I loved it. So
The other thing with the Dark Sword is also
Dark Sword's good too. Yep.
Yeah.
Rose the Prophet, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some of their other series I love.
It's much better than Dragonlance.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll never look. Raceland is.
Yeah, well,
Raceland will always be one of my favorites forever and ever and ever. So yeah, but I think there is that aspect of Matt, and so I wanted to mention that Matt definitely appealed to me as a kid. Like and so I wasn't annoyed by Matt in The Great Hunt. I wasn't annoyed by him in The Eye of the World. I actually really loved his character, and so I didn't have that arc of not liking him and then liking him, or liking him and then not liking him, whatever, as fans kind of react differently. For me, I always liked him as a character. It's like he wasn't one of the ones that I had kind of a dislike or a really changing. I don't that I've ever had a changing effect of that nature for Matt. But it makes sense because it's just from an age range. It's really well written, and that's what I think he does. Jordan does really well. I think is he finds ways to give people experiences that he doesn't have to show you. So flicker. That is a huge experience generator, right? Like they come out of that experience like, whoa, I'm affected. I'm different. Matt, Ingtar, Varen, as in they all make comments and you're like, wow, again, I don't know, maybe every other author does this, but what a brilliant way to fast forward some maturation or some change.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, we talked about it last time because we that chapter was on it, and I was saying that whenever I do something similar to that chapter, where it's like maybe a kind of not something that's exactly the same, but whenever it's kind of like a weird or metaphysical thing that I'm writing, I will go back and read that chapter because it's done so well. Everything from even the way it's crafted, how like the paragraphs start getting shorter and shorter and the sections get shorter and shorter until it builds this deluge of information. It's and like as you said, like each character from the comments they do, or even how they're just staring. Like Ingtar's got his hand on his hilt and he's just staring into space because like he's just they've seen something that's just completely shocked them and changed them utterly.
Yeah, and it works. Like he just makes it where it doesn't feel out of place because he had already taken us to a kind of a portal, to a mirror world, and so it feels, and you just buy it. Like for me, that's one of the things Jordan has always done well over these first two books is I buy into the world, right? I don't think it's hard to remember. I'm sure I loved The Eye of the World, but it did feel like more generic. I think we talked about this last time at the end of The Eye of the World. It was like, yeah, I'd read a lot of these type of things. I had read a lot of books up to this point, even when I was young, to be like, yeah, this feels like it's been done before, but this is good. This was a good version of it. The Great Hunt for me was completely changed that perspective to me. Not that there weren't tropes in there that I'd seen elsewhere, but it just felt like, oh, this is going to be a fun ride. This is a whole big kind of world that I hadn't ever conceived of.
I would like to do like just an episode where we just could talk about the Great Hunt in its entirety as like, where did he take some of the inspiration from? Like, because we were talking about his sword and sorcery background as a Conan the Barbarian author and how it kind of reflects on the Shanshan and stuff like that. And I have, as I said off camera before, I have some questions regarding some Clark Ashton Smith similarities in his world building and stuff like that. But I mean, that'll have to be a different episode because I think time is up. Now it is Mother's Day here, or in the States and in Canada, after all.
We can't be the boys talking about fantasy all morning when there's
we can.
But Matt, thanks so much for coming on again, and obviously please come back on again at the end of when we get to the end of the Dragon Reborn, which is a bit shorter than this book anyway, we could probably talk about the entire first arc anyway.
Trilogy,
It is like a trilogy. So what's coming up next for you on the Dusty Wheel and the Barside Tracks? Because I know you're arranging your schedule at the moment.
Yeah. So we're just scheduling out the next 8, 10, I sometimes say 12 weeks of episodes. I try to get ahead of those because trying to do those on a weekly basis and then keeping that going is just so disturbing to the schedule of like my normal life that it's impossible. So I try to like grow them all together and like, okay, here's the next 8 weeks. And I don't have to really think about it as much. So yeah, just a lot of Wheel of Time episodes. We do a lot of these becoming episodes. We talk about the actors' works that have been picked for the cast of and crew of the Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime. So like we just talked about Barney Harris, and basically I have a couple other fans join in with this, and we just watch as many of the previous works as we can, and we talk about those and talk about what we think the actors, what do they do well, and then how does that transcend to what we think the character and how they'll embody the character. That's always a lot of fun. And we're going to do Moiraine. We're going to do a couple other characters here. So obviously tackle Rosamund Pike, and maybe we'll get to Tom, maybe we'll get to Logain, maybe we'll get to Padden Fane here, and it's just fun. It's fun to jump in and take a different look at the material. And so yeah, those are coming up, and we're doing more live adaptations. We're going to do more gaming. We're going to do more. We're just going to basically keep doing what we do at the Dusty Wheel from a live weekly talk show perspective, and just keep going down that road until and well beyond when the TV series launches, because there'll be plenty to talk about and plenty of episodes to do. I mean, I'll be honest, once the show comes out, our shows will probably be even 90% the show, and we'll still do live adaptations and things, but those will be probably fewer and further between is my guess, but I don't know. We'll see when we get there. And then, Barside Chats, it really is meant to be just kind of a casual chat about, the books, and that's what we do. It tends to be like 30 to 40-minute episodes, really casual, with my good friend Brian, and we do those like once every 3 weeks. We don't kind of stress to make them come out too often. And so yeah, they're both fun endeavors. I don't know that I thought I'd be doing all this again. It's another turning for me from a fandom perspective after Theoryland. So it's fun to be back doing this and talking about the book. So yeah, I appreciate you guys having me here.
No, I sound we love you coming on. And what you left out there in the scheduling is that more likely than not, the trailer's going to be coming out imminently. So it's going to be Trailer-mageddon.
Yeah. It's going to be Trailer-mageddon. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I imagine it's going to be insane just how much stuff is going to be talked about in the trailer. I mean, when you think about like the 5-second clips, and we talk about an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like last night when we talked about that release that they had, that maybe it was accidental from the German Prime Video account. It was 5 seconds, but all the callers, if you go back and listen to the episode, all the callers had something unique to point out that we hadn't considered, whether or not it was a belt over here, or a hairy leg for a trolloc, or it looked like a minotaur, or the weapons they were holding, or whatever it is, Moiraine's costume, the lighting, the buildings in the background, whether or not there's fire or not going on. There were so many things to talk about that I can't imagine what a trailer is going to be like.
Yeah, I'm sure you're hoping that a trailer is going to be like 60 seconds max, because if it's going to be like a 2-minute trailer, it's going to be like we've been live streaming all night. We're up to
exactly. I keep on threatening. I threaten when I say threaten, in a very kind way, that we're gonna be doing a 10-hour live stream probably when this thing drops, because I'm not gonna be able to talk about anything else that day. It's not gonna be good for work. Like, why would I go back to work and just the entire time be wondering about the trailer? So we'll just
exactly. No,
it'll be insane.
Can't wait. It's gonna be fun. So yeah, that's it. So thanks very much for coming on again, and we will definitely have you on for the end of the Dragon Reborn, and we can wrap up.
Thank you for coming on, and David, we'll have to put it up in the show notes what we've got going on.
Yes.
What do we usually say?
Until the next turn of the wheel.
Absolutely.
There we go.